She prayed with faith, and Our Lady answered. She no longer knew if God could hear her. But that morning, with her knees sinking into the cold mud of the abandoned chapel, Maria Clara prayed like someone shouting into a bottomless pit. Not with pretty words, but with pain, with despair, with fear. She wasn't asking for a miracle. She was begging time to stop. She was begging for her daughter not to die. Santa Efigenia das Pedras was a place where time dozed off. Mornings came with the smell of brewed coffee and burning firewood, and news traveled slower than the farmers' horses. The clay houses, with their faded red roofs, held more secrets than furniture. And among all the families there, one stood in a deeper silence, that of Maria Clara de Almeida, a teacher at the local school, a single mother, and a woman of forgotten faith. No one dared knock on her door since Livia, her 8-year-old daughter, fell ill. What started as a stubborn fever turned into something darker. Tests were run in the capital. The doctors spoke in low voices, as if ashamed of the diagnosis. Rare progressive demyelination, the neurologist said, avoiding Clara's eyes. Translated into pain, the girl would slowly waste away until she could no longer breathe on her own. Clara listened in silence, gripping her daughter's hand as if it were a lifeline. Her husband, Eduardo, sighed deeply and never returned to the hospital. In the village, gossip spread quickly. They said it was punishment, that the girl was too fragile, that Clara had sinned in her youth. She listened to it all quietly, coming back from the hospital with a distant gaze, pushing her daughter's wheelchair down the dirt road like someone pushing her own cross. Every glance she received was an invisible stone on her heart. But she hadn't cried, she hadn't prayed. Her faith, once lively and dancing, had died along with her mother, the town healer, taken by a silent cancer. One cold August morning, Clara got up without knowing why. She left Livia asleep, wrapped herself in an old shawl that belonged to her mother, and walked the forgotten trail that led to the chapel of Our Lady of Fatima on top of the hill. The last time she'd been there was at her mother's funeral. The chapel's windows were boarded shut. The altar was covered in dust. The statue of the Virgin, with a chipped face, looked down as if mourning its abandonment. Still, Clara knelt, not out of faith, out of exhaustion. She didn't ask for healing. She asked for time, a chance to see her daughter grow, to hear Livia's laughter at least one more time. The words didn't come from her mouth. They poured from her eyes. For Clara, crying was praying with the body. And there, in the damp mud, she cried with her soul. A strange wind blew through the chapel, knocking a dry leaf onto the altar. A candle, long unlit, flickered for 2 seconds and went out. Clara looked around, thought it might be a hallucination, but she felt something. And then she went home. The next morning, something changed. Livia, who could barely open her eyes in the previous days, was awake and smiling. "Mommy, I dreamed of a lady in a blue dress. She told me you were coming," the girl whispered. Clara froze. She hadn't told anyone about her visit to the chapel. A chill ran down her spine. She touched her daughter's forehead. It was warm. Her fingers moved, weak but alive. It was impossible. And yet, it was real. The silence in the house felt less heavy, as if some invisible breath now lived there too. That afternoon, Clara returned to the chapel, this time with an old rosary around her neck, the same one her mother used during novenas. The statue of the Virgin looked a little less dusty, and when Clara approached, she noticed something impossible. A thin tear was falling from the statue's eye. She thought she was imagining it. She wiped her eyes, touched the statue. It was water, a tear. The statue was crying. That shattered what was left of Clara's emotional armor. For the first time in years, she knelt not out of despair, but out of faith. In the days that followed, small improvements began to repeat themselves. Livia could eat with help. She smiled more than once. The doctors were puzzled, and the neighbors started talking. Some said Clara was making it all up. Others whispered about a miracle. Doña Amalia, the old local healer, heard the rumors and smiled to herself, murmuring, "She heard her, the lady heard her." The town, so used to silence, was beginning to stir with the idea that the impossible might be happening again. But not everyone was ready to believe. The local priest, a skeptical and politically cautious man, disapproved of Clara's exaggerated, emotional displays. "Faith is not a spectacle," he said, and many in town began to fear that sudden attention would bring shame. Even so, Clara continued walking up the hill every day. With every prayer, something inside her was rebuilding, as if the broken pieces of who she had been, woman, daughter, mother abandoned, were fitting back together. But she still didn't know the price that faith would ask of her. On the last night of that week, Clara had a dream. She was standing in a field engulfed in flames, holding her daughter in her arms. In the center of the fire, a woman in a blue mantle was looking at her and weeping. She woke up drenched in sweat, Livia trembling beside her. But the girl's face was serene, as if she had heard something sweet while sleeping. Clara knew something was coming, something bigger than her, bigger than the illness, bigger than fear. And when she returned to the chapel, she found a winter flower on the floor, in full bloom, in the cold, alive. What began as whispers became rumor, and the rumor, talk of a miracle. In the town's general store, people said the little girl who was dying was now smiling. At school, they said the Virgin had cried because she knew the mother's soul was pure. Others, more cruel, called it a performance by a desperate woman. Clara, indifferent to all of it, continued her routine with a calm that felt more like resignation than belief. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time since the diagnosis, she woke up wanting to breathe. Though still fragile, Livia seemed to come back to life in small gestures. She laughed to herself, stared at the ceiling as if seeing something Clara couldn't. She sings, "To me when you're not here, Mommy," she said once. Clara asked who it was, but Livia would just smile and go back to drawing with her trembling fingers. Each line was an attempt to eternalize the invisible. Blue flowers, a flowing mantle, eyes that cried light. Clara began collecting those drawings. One by one, she kept them like relics, sensing they meant more than words ever could. One violet sky afternoon, Clara climbed the hill with Livia, for the first time since the illness began. With great effort, she carried her daughter in her arms. The air felt lighter up there, as if the hill existed outside of time. Inside the chapel, Livia touched the statue of the Virgin and whispered, "She feels your pain, Mommy. She lost a child too." Clara shuddered. No one had ever told Livia the story of the Virgin's son. It was the first time her daughter made such a clear connection with something sacred, and yet so human. That night, Clara dreamed again. She stood before a procession, but everyone was wearing white masks, faceless. At the center, a woman in a blue mantle cried tears of blood. And when she looked at Clara, she said, "Not every miracle saves you from pain, my child." Clara woke up sobbing, her breath short. She grabbed her rosary and prayed for the first time without asking for anything. She only said, "If I must lose my daughter, let me not lose myself," a prayer that hurt more than the illness. The next morning, Doña Amalia showed up at her gate. She clapped her hands loudly, leaning on her wooden cane, her small eyes shining beneath a floral scarf. "You dreamed of her, didn't you?" she asked bluntly. Clara hesitated. She's not crazy, Clara thought, but maybe she sees the world through eyes that no longer belong to this time. Amalia walked in, looked at Livia, and whispered an ancient prayer, almost forgotten. One Clara vaguely remembered from her childhood. The old woman smiled like someone watching a seed sprout. "She chose you, child. Now hold on." The days that followed were a mixture of light and shadow. Livia suffered a strong seizure, vomited blood, and slept for hours. Clara rushed her to the hospital in a nearby town. The doctors were baffled. They found no explanation. For the episode, no lasting damage. It's like her body is fighting itself and winning, one of them said. Clara simply gave thanks in silence. She began sleeping with one hand on her daughter and the other on the rosary, as if linking body and soul through an invisible thread. At school, Students started whispering in fear and fascination. Some drew images of saints crying. One little girl said she dreamed of Livia walking among the clouds. The principal called Clara in for a conversation, suggesting she be more discreet because the town was restless. "People are talking a lot about you, Clara, and not everyone with kindness." Clara gave a sad smile. "Let them talk. I didn't ask for any of this. I just want my daughter to live." The principal looked at her with pity, but inside, like everyone else, she feared this might be all too real. Eduardo showed up again, dirty, gaunt, eyes sunken, and his pride still greater than his fear. He asked to see his daughter, said he wanted to make things right. Clara welcomed him in silence. She let him see Livia for 5 minutes. The girl, confused, simply said, "You came back, Daddy?" "She said you were coming," Eduardo cried. Clara didn't. She only asked him to leave. "If you really want to make things right, pray for her, but from far away." He left without protest. For the first time, Clara felt stronger than him. On the hill, Clara found flowers on the chapel windows. Someone else had been there. Inside, she discovered a note written in shaky handwriting. "She cried for me too, thank you." Signed only with the letter J, Clara didn't know whether to smile or weep. Faith seemed to have become an epidemic. Silent, subversive, intimate. A faith not born in churches or books, but in the pain shared by women who carry the world on their backs. She knew this was growing, and there would be no turning back. One windless night, Clara knelt alone in the chapel and said aloud, "If it must hurt, let it hurt in me, but let her live." The statue of the Virgin shimmered in the candlelight, and at that exact moment, Livia, back home, awoke from a nightmare screaming, "Mommy! The fire! There's going to be fire!" Clara rushed home to find her daughter trembling in terror, and the vision from the dream would return, stronger. Clara didn't know yet, but the next sign would not be a blessing, it would be a warning. The key. Dream returned on the third night. This time, Clara was at the school, surrounded by faceless children running in circles as the ground shook beneath them. At the center of the playground, Livia was screaming for help, trapped in a ring of fire. When Clara woke up, the sweat clung to her skin like guilt. She didn't dare tell anyone, not even Doña Amalia. "Dreams don't kill," she whispered, trying to convince herself. But deep down she knew it wasn't just a warning, it was a sentence. The following afternoon, during a sudden storm, lightning struck the school's transformer. A short circuit caused a small fire, enough to injure a staff member and frighten the students. Clara, still at home, knew the moment it happened. Her heart skipped. She ran to the school and found the yard covered in ash, the scent of smoke still fresh in the air. The scene was exactly what she had seen in her dream. It couldn't be coincidence. It was as if reality were following the script of her nightmares. The village reacted with fear. Church ladies began whispering. During Mass, one of them, the councilman's wife, said aloud, "That woman messes with things that aren't from God." Another claimed to have seen Clara, talking to herself in the chapel like she was possessed. The local priest, under pressure, preached a harsh sermon against the worship of images and the danger of superstition. He didn't name names, but everyone knew who he meant. People started avoiding Clara on the street, as if she carried a spiritual sickness. Still, she climbed the hill to the chapel every day, sometimes in silence, sometimes yelling. "Why show me if I can't stop it?" she asked the statue, with rage and faith tangled together. Meanwhile, Livia drifted between small improvements and violent setbacks. In one episode, she lost her vision for several hours. She said, "The light went away." When she could see again, she described seeing her dead grandmother holding flowers in the dark. "She smiled at me, Mommy. She said, 'It's almost time.'" Clara clung to her rosary like an anchor. She began sleeping with it around her neck, even though the chains hurt her skin. During a desperate prayer, the object heated in her hand like burning coal. It was impossible. She threw it away in fear. The next day, she went to Doña Amalia and told her everything. The old woman looked at her with sorrow. "What you carry in that rosary is not just faith. It's blood. Your mother had visions too." But she never told anyone, because she knew. Our Lady's answers never come without pain. That same afternoon, Amalia gave Clara a wooden box that had been hidden in her home for years. Inside were letters written by Clara's mother, pages of prayers, confessions and old nightmares. In one of them her mother wrote, "If one day the lady cries again, it will be through my daughter, and it will be a tear of loss, not glory." Clara read it and wept like someone finally seeing their own face. After a lifetime of avoiding mirrors, her mother had known all along, and still she had prayed until the end. Eduardo tried to return one last time. He brought a Bible, a ring, and hollow promises. Clara let him in without a word, her eyes unwavering. When he entered the bedroom and saw Livia pale, whispering that she had seen the blue lady by the door, he fell to his knees. But Clara didn't give in. "You're not here for her, you're here because you're afraid of punishment." He tried to hug her. She stepped back. "You're not my miracle, and I'm no longer your penance." And for the first time, Eduardo cried, for himself. That night, Livia had a seizure, strong, prolonged. Clara called the hospital, but something inside her knew. It wasn't just her daughter's body breaking, it was the thread between worlds. Livia faded. The doctor said, "She's in a light coma. She could wake up in hours, or days, or never." Clara sat by her bed, eyes dry. She didn't pray. She simply held her daughter's hand and whispered, "If she must go, then take me too." In the silence of the hospital room, Clara heard footsteps from nowhere. The rosary on the nightstand spun on its own. The window slammed shut, without wind. Then the framed photo of her grandmother fell, revealing something hidden behind it. A small handwritten prayer. "Surrender, don't ask, just surrender." Clara understood. She cried, not from despair, but from surrender. At sunrise, eyes swollen, soul shattered, she returned to the chapel and whispered, "Let it be done, in me according to your will." The candle on the altar lit itself. The statue of Our Lady of Fatima glowed for a moment, then in silence, deep, complete, like a womb made of stone. In that moment, Maria Clara de Almeida understood. The miracle was not to avoid pain, but to pass through it and emerge on the other side with love intact. When she returned home, Livia was still asleep, but on her face there was a smile, the peace before the storm, because what came next would be the climax, and nothing after would ever be the same. If this story touched your soul, take a deep breath. Now tell me, how's your life today? Do you need a miracle? Let's pray together with hearts full of faith. O Blessed Virgin of Fatima, Mother of the one true God, receive this son, this daughter, who comes to you in prayer. Cover us with your sacred mantle and intercede for us. Strengthen those who weep, heal the sick, comfort the broken-hearted. You who never abandon those who believe, stay with us. Amen. If you felt his presence, just like he did, subscribe to the channel and come discover the next miracle. It's there, waiting for you.